And my mother-in-law, she sat down with Dr. Israr, I don't know, for maybe an hour or more. And then Dr. Israr returned to Lahore to write in his book about the lovely biryani he ate at my home. And when I went to Pakistan, I was really tremendously impressed by the Tanzim Islami. But the public ought to know why it is that I parted from Dr. Israr Ahmed. As soon as Jerusalem in the Quran was published shortly after 9/11, it immediately became a bestseller. And by the time in 1999, I had already built the structure of Jerusalem in the Quran, in which the subject of Dajjal was located and the subject of Gog and Magog was located. The breakthrough had already been achieved. But Dr. Israr Ahmed was visiting New York. And when I was principal during that time, I met with him. And I even invited him to come to my home. And my wife cooked a very nice biryani. And my mother-in-law, who was the wife of Maulana Fazlur Rahman Ansari, she sat down with Dr. Israr, I don't know, for maybe an hour or more. And they were chatting and talking about her father, Maulana Muhammad Abdul Aleem Siddiqui. And then Dr. Israr returned to Lahore to write in his book about the lovely biryani he ate at my home. So I knew Dr. Israr already. So when I was in New York, and he's now visiting New York regularly, I'm now interacting with him. And then he invited me to come to Pakistan. Must have been 96. And when I went to Pakistan, I was really tremendously impressed by the Tanzim Islami. The Sufi sheikhs had never done what he did, and what Maulana Abul Ala Maududi did, rahimahullah. The discipline, the organization of the Tanzim Islami was admirable to behold. And I then decided I would become a member of the Tanzim. From the time I joined the Tanzim, Dr. Israr immediately started pushing me up, right up. And after a short while he said to me, I want you to become the Amir of Tanzim Islami of all of North America. But then by 1998-99, the trouble started because of Jerusalem in the Quran. The views that I was expressing on Dajjal and on Gog and Magog were contrary from his, because he didn't have the methodology that I had. The views that I expressed on the Muslim village rattled him. And one day he called a session with everybody present, and he spent 1 hour doing everything he could to bring down the subject of a Muslim village. Imran is wrong, without calling my name. And I'm sitting in the audience. So I'm seeing us drawing apart. But then one day, and I have to mention this in public with sadness, I wish I didn't have to do it, but the public ought to know why it is that I parted from Dr. Israr Ahmed, because he's a man for whom I have great respect and great admiration, great love. I admire tremendously his integrity, I admire his dedication, I admire the insistence of the importance that he placed to the Quran, and the greatest admiration of all I have is for the organization that he built. And the members of the Tanzim still love me very, very much. He called me in one day and he said to me, Imran, I'm ordering you, this is my order to you, you're not allowed to write and you're not allowed to speak on the subjects of Dajjal and of Gog and Magog. I didn't wait for the words to leave his mouth all the way. From the time he gave that order, I rejected immediately. Immediately. No human being has authority over any other human being in the world of knowledge. You can differ with me, sure, but you can't stop me. So that was the parting. If I had remained in the Tanzim, then there was the likelihood that some of the members of the Tanzim would have been persuaded that I am correct. And that would have been disaster for the organization. So, although I left the Tanzim, I have always held Dr. Israr Ahmed in great respect. I have never criticized him or his organization, never. But there's a difference of methodology between us. And I was able to publish Jerusalem in the Quran shortly after that. And Jerusalem in the Quran was the answer, 29 years later, to what Dr. Kaleem Siddiqui had asked me to do. As soon as Jerusalem in the Quran was published in 2001, shortly after 9/11, it immediately became a bestseller. And 20 years have passed and it still remains a bestseller. Hundreds of thousands, I don't know how many people around the world have already read that book and are convinced that it is correct. And the numbers are constantly increasing. But the sad thing is that the world of Islamic scholarship seems to be stuck in concrete. They cannot condemn the book. No. They don't have the courage to do that. Nor can they accept the book, because they are stuck with their methodology in concrete. So the scholars remain aloof from that book. But the rest of the world has already accepted the book, read it and accepted it. This is correct. And that's where we are today.